This episode brought about a lot of reflections. Reflections, they shape us. Without them, our paths and the systems we're a part of might never change. Looking inward creates agency, and that agency can spark shifts that ripple from the individual to the societal, eventually reshaping policy and reality itself. In this episode, we sit down with Eran, a former soldier in the Israeli army, an institution responsible for the oppression, dispossession, and violence our people continue to face. As a Palestinian, this conversation was incredibly difficult for me to have. It required me to confront a system that harms us every day while speaking directly with someone who once served within it. But it was also necessary to understand how individuals who are part of that machinery can choose to break away from it, challenge it, and push their own society to reckon with the truth. Eran's journey from enforcing a violent reality to publicly resisting it, one post and one act of accountability at a time, is part of a broader question about what real change demands. Violence shapes our reality, and our reality continues to produce violence. We condemn that cycle, including the violence of the Israeli army, and we believe naming it is essential to breaking it. This episode sits in that tension, and that's why it matters. I'm your host, Amira.
And I'm your host, Ibrahim.
And this is UTTN, the podcast.
Before we start this episode, we would like to say a special thank you for Beit of Hope, who's sponsoring this episode and helping us with this season. Beit of Hope is an organization working to support peace activists on the ground in order to create real change. And now, without further ado, to our amazing guest, Eran. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It's very exciting.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
A long-time friend as well.
Happy to be here.
Eran, we're very excited. It's been you've been one of the episodes we talked about a lot.
So let's lower our expectations.
No, we hype up most of our guests.
Okay. That's good.
Since you said you're a long-time listener, you can see the stark difference between the visuals of this season and also the segments. So we're going to jump straight into it. First segment is basically, who are you? Where we ask our guests 3 times who they are, and they're allowed to answer with one word. And after that, we dissect. So I'm going to ask you, Eran, who are you?
I'm a father.
Who are you?
I'm an activist.
And if I want to ask you one last time, who are you?
I'm a juggler.
Should I ask you again?
No.
Okay. Just because the second segment is all about your activism, let's keep the second part till the end, and let's start with the first 2. Now, we're very much aware that even though those things represent you, and we're going to see why, but we know that you, as a person, as an activist, as a human being, are way more. But these are the things that just came up, so we're going to talk about them. So the first word, you're a father. You want to tell us?
Father.
A new father, yeah. So it's a category of my identity, or part of my identity, that is relatively new. I have a daughter who's almost 6 months old. She was born during the war. And I like being a father, but having a kid during war is very difficult. And I was born during a war. So
Which one?
The first Gulf War.
Wow.
In the winter of 91. So in 1991, Saddam Hussein, then the ruler of Iraq, invades Kuwait. There's an international coalition. There's war. And Saddam Hussein launches rockets into Israeli cities. And
The Scad rockets.
Yeah,
at the time.
And sirens, it just communicates the fact that this is such a crazy place to live in. That there are rockets from very many different regions of the world being launched into this part of the world. And my parents tell me that I was born, there were sirens and rockets on the night that I was born, that I was rushed from the delivery room into a bomb shelter. And I had that experience of taking Ella, that's my daughter, from her crib and running to find shelter. We don't have a safe room in our apartment in Jaffa, so we step out to the stairwell, and we're meeting our neighbors in the stairwell. So I like being a father; it suits me, but I'm also aware of the, I will say, abnormality of trying to raise a kid and shelter a kid, and like during war with sirens and everything. Even now, when we're recording this podcast, I put my phone on airplane mode, and I'm constantly thinking, if there's going to be sirens, I'm not going to know. If there's going to be sirens in Jaffa, if Shir, my partner, she's going to need me. So I'm a father. A lot of anxieties and fears, but also a lot of happy moments and moments of normality. Because in this kind of work, you try to create a work-life balance. During the Iran thing, we call it at work the war-life balance.
War-life balance.
Yeah, so you know that at a certain hour of the day, you put your phone aside and you need to be with yourself, with your partner, with your kid, because this is a marathon and we need to prevent from people burning out.
I mean, as an adult, I can say that it's not easy living here, regardless of where, when. It's difficult living here, specifically now the past almost 2 years. So I can't imagine how it is for kids.
With a child.
Yeah, or being a parent.
I mean, my best friend's, son, I think when it really hits you is when a 2-year-old is aware of what a siren is.
Yeah.
And, one time, I will never forget that. It was the first time I see him actually interact with sirens, where he heard the phone ring with the sirens on the phone, and he didn't hear the siren outside. And that made him cry. Because he's used to this and then that. And when the second sound didn't come up, he's like, wait, something is wrong. And he freaked out and he started crying. And you see, it's crazy that we have a reality where you have people, you're raising kids into knowing rockets and sirens and fear. And he would tell you, yeah, people are afraid. Like a 2-year-old would tell me, my best friend's son, everybody was afraid in the shelter. It was just like in an innocent way. It's unbelievable. I have a question on that before we move to the second, to the other terms that you used. Did becoming a father change or emphasized your work, or did it create any difference in mindset, or in maybe in the urgency, in the agency on what you do? Because you've been working in this field for a long time. Do you feel that something within you changed now? I have one personal friend who's my best friend's mom. Since now she has a grandson, she puts, whenever she's not working, she's doing activism. And we asked her, like, what is this change? It's just because of the kid. I have a grandson. What I can do is to make sure that this little child will not grow up into the reality that I know exists today. And it changed completely how she's been operating. She was skeptical about peace activism or about organizations and what they do, and now she's like, screw it. Yeah, none of them are doing exactly what I want, but I need to do something. How did it change or elevate, or for you, what did it translate to you?
I think that my form of activism is very much intertwined with like a generational perspective. Like we're not going to talk about the second, like I'm an activist, but if I had 2 words and not just 1 word, I will say I'm a generational activist.
Okay.
And if I had 3 words, I will say a generational peace activist. But the generational aspect of it, understanding that not just this conflict, but the tensions and the inequality and the things that we're fighting against and the things that we're fighting for are not just because of differences like ethnic and religion and political like orientation and identity, but also we have this generational divide that even now in this room, we are all more or less at the same age. The people who are running things and are making decisions every day, the people who are deciding our future and our present, They're not from our generation. And in a normal reality, in a normal society, the older people, they say, we need to leave a better world for our children, for the next generation, and therefore we will sacrifice our interests for the future. But what we have here in Israel and also in Palestine is that we have a old, uh, I will say, um, cruel leadership that is insisting on holding on to their chairs and are willing to sacrifice us in our generation and teaching us to fear and hate and sending us to kill and die so they can stay where they are, because they're fighting against reality and the trends of reality. The world is changing and they don't want it to change. So I have a lot of generational drive even before I was a father, before I was a parent. I don't think it changed something dramatically about my politics, about how I hold myself up, because I see this generational divide when I'm working with people that are younger than I and people that are my age. But I think I'm more angry, especially in the sirens when I need to wake her up. There's like this unwritten rule that the person who wakes up sleeping baby needs to
take care.
needs to put the baby back to sleep, but none of them are coming to help us help Ella fall asleep again. So I think I'm more angry. You said about a sense of urgency. I think we all feel the sense of urgency, even before October 7th and this war. I think that we were exposed to realities in the last decade, and especially the last, I will say, 5 years, that there's this anxiety that this is an unsustainable status quo, which is a oxymoron. Like, it's a status quo, but it's unsustainable. And we need to make sure that when it breaks for the better and not for worse.
Since we're talking about your family, I know that you're kind of like the UN in your family, from people from you to your family to your partner's family, and now passing it on to your daughter. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I was born in Israel. I was raised in Israel. My father was born in Iran, and usually I don't look very Iranian, but that's what it is. And he grew up in Tehran until he was 18. So his childhood friends, his high school, his childhood memories of riding a bicycle in the main square of Tehran seems very, very weird. And also back then, before the Islamic Revolution of 1979, Israel and Iran were very, very close allies. The number one ally of Israel was the United States. Number two was Iran. Two non-Arab countries in a very Arab neighborhood. A lot of negative connotations of colonialism and imperialism and things in the last century, but Iran and Israel were allies. And my father, he was the son of Iraqi Jews. So my grandparents, they were Iraqi Jews, and they fled Baghdad in 1948. In 1948, with the establishment of the State of Israel, a lot of Arab-speaking countries became a very unsafe place for Jews. My wife, Shir, she's half Moroccan, half Yemenite. So her grandparents came from Morocco and Yemen. My mom was born in Israel. Her parents came from Poland and Romania. So it's a very mixed family, a lot of different backgrounds. But I think what is common to everyone in this story is that they were, except me and Shir, who were born here, that they left where they were in order to find a place that they can call home and that they can live a safe life. And I'm sorry to say that they failed. Like, this is not a safe place. People say, like, the promise of the State of Israel is a place where Jews can be safe. We're not safe. We weren't safe, and we will never be safe and free until Palestinians will be safe and free.
Yeah, to be honest, exactly what you said. Even before October 2023, when I used to like give speaking engagements to Jewish groups, I would raise that question: is, people talk about there's no solution, this is the reality, this is the situation, which makes me wonder about something that you said, that in the past 5 years, I think people who've been active have been seeing the urgency, but I think the general public didn't. May 2021 happened. What do we do after? We sweep everything under the rug as if nothing happened. We move normal with life. And I ask Jewish communities and groups that I meet, I'm like, this is what the Jewish people really want? Like, that's the end goal? Is like you said, we go to look for a safe life. Is this the life you want? Even before October, like what? Rockets every few months is normal? Like, that's what you really want? Aren't you aspiring for better?
The government was also like, I get what you're saying, and the government was also like parading the facade of the Abraham Accords of like, see, we're integrated. The occupation is manageable. It can continue the way it is, and we can look. You can go to Dubai and Abu Dhabi now. You can go to Morocco. You can go to Bahrain, and then it's like, oh, next step is Saudi Arabia. Like I can understand the facade.
Why would that happen?
Yeah,
it's more than manageable. It's that we can bypass the Palestinians.
Yeah.
It's we can get to Riyadh without going through Ramallah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's a lot of illusions that were broken in the last 2 years, but this is one of them.
Yeah, because the rockets will continue to happen. Even if hypothetically there was a peace agreement with Saudi, October 7th never happened. There were still rockets every few months into this country. Yeah. Like, this is not a normal reality, and you can't. It's what we say all the time. Israeli security cannot come without Palestinian liberation, just as Palestinian liberation cannot come without Israeli security. But the Israelis are not grasping this element.
When you have a prison guard and a prisoner, and the prison guard handcuffed the prisoner, they're both in handcuffs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is our fates and our lives and our futures are intertwined. And we will never be safe and free until Palestinians will be safe and free. I think that this is not a realization that is very common in Israel society or in Palestinian society. But I think that the I would say peace camp, the co-resistance, the anti-occupation, pro-human rights, pro-justice, they understand that our futures here are together and that our fates and lives are intertwined. And I think that there's something in social psychology called resilience. And resilience usually is celebrated. Resilience is the ability to maintain functionality during crisis. But resilience also have this definition of the ability to bounce back. That you have a crisis, and it's called bending without breaking. This is the first part of it. So, like during COVID, you had places not here, like Italy, that you have the health system bend and bend and bend and then break. And then even people with very mild medical conditions couldn't get care. So systems that break. But the Israeli society is very, very resilient. The ability to bounce back after a crisis is ended is usually very celebrated. It seems like something that we should be proud of, but it's not always like that. A couple of weeks ago, there was an attack, terrorist attack in Jerusalem. There was a bus stop, and these two guys came, and I think 5 or 6 people were murdered. And an hour after the first shot was fired, the buses, like, they come, they clear the wounded, they clear the dead bodies, they clear the glass, and then you have like 2 or 3 sad songs in the radio, and life moves on. And I think that whenever there was this eruption of violence, we would stop for a moment and not just grieve, but be angry and understand what happened, and not just try to sweep it under the rug and say, no, if we let ourselves like cry or think about it, then they win. Like, this is the purpose of the other side. They're trying to terrorize us. But if we would realize that this is not a normal reality, when you board a bus and you need to think twice, when you walk in the street and you need to think twice, that you need to have only one earphone in case there's like a siren. I think that the ability to bounce back after there's rockets or an attack or a war, it's not a good thing. We need to know how to say that was fucked up. Like, this is not, we can't continue to do this. So, yeah.
Do you think that's what happened after October 7th, though? I feel like when there's political gain, it's used as a pawn. Even though I don't think the Israeli people had the chance to grieve. With everything going on, because there are still hostages in Gaza. However, it is used as if, like, if you walk the streets, there's like the pictures, there's advertisements in the bus. Like it felt not as a space to grieve, but as a space to stay in that moment and to understand that, like, this is where we are right now, and to justify certain political decisions. Like, I grew up in Jerusalem. Like, I know very well what you're talking about. Like, my own street has been like police, no police. The yellow tape, no yellow tape. The station for the light rail, where the station next to my house, like during like certain heightened periods, like when Ramadan and other Jewish and Christian holidays coincide, there's always some shit happening. And my school is like next to Damascus Gate. That's where everything goes down. And it's also the locations for so much celebration at the same time. And it's minutes. Like, it happens, and then you would never know that it happened unless you read it on the news. But what do you think about what I just said about October 7th?
And maybe I'll add to that, is not just the symbols on the street. I think maybe, quote unquote, the worst part of it is that, you know, like, there's a difference, I think, between putting things on the street to remind people that the situation is still ongoing. But I think even the worst part in terms of how you interact with your own society I was, like, for instance, listening to the news in the first 3-4 months in a row every morning. Every single morning, you had, you know, every third guest was someone who talked about what happened to them on October 7th. For months, it got to the point that you talk to the same person you talked to 2 months before, and then he just continues his story. It's like they kept people here in this trauma for months on end. Every morning you open the radio, aside from just seeing the yellow and the photos, you're hearing like horrible stories every single morning for months.
Even when you leave the airport, like where you scan your electronic passport, you see all the faces of the people, like, kidnapped and dead. I get the
symbol, and the thing is, with the airport, for instance, and a lot of the symbolism themselves, I get it. I get the importance to remind that there is an ongoing situation and is not changing. And it's also, we talked about it, I don't even remember if it's this season, last season, from so many conversations that we had, that it was missing for me, for instance, seeing it in Ramallah. To remind the people there is something still ongoing. Like, I get the symbolism, but the keeping the people in the trauma is the problem, I think, is when you hear months on end of conversation around the same day and continuing to give another story, another horrible story, another horror story, another every day for months and months and months. You cannot get to a place of healing, and not even post-trauma, because you're still in the trauma, and there is a system that's maintaining the trauma on a daily basis, keeping these stories alive every day. It's suffocating, and it's not healthy for society.
I agree, but I want to say that in the examples that you gave, it's the focus on the hostages. And the thing that, because there are still hostages in Gaza, and there's so much distrust of the government from the hostage family, from the general public, the constant need to remind is not to normalize it. I think that if if the public, the people were convinced that the government is doing whatever they can to bring a hostage deal, we would have seen less of the symbolism, this insistence of reminding and putting it in the public sphere, because there is an attempt to erase. There's the like Channel 14, the far right like propaganda. Even on the day, like on October 7th at the evening, there's a quote by Smotrich that he says, we shouldn't put so much emphasis on the hostages. Like this is like and a lot of the more, I will say, revenge driven rhetoric is about, we need to treat the hostages as casualties of October 7th. So there's a narrative war about priorities. I think in the first couple of weeks, I would also wake up very early in the morning and I will listen to the radio. And they started the shows reading the names of people who were killed for weeks. Like the amount of death and destruction, and like a lot of people that they didn't know what happened to them. So there was a lot of chaos and a lot of trauma. But I definitely agree with what you said about we can't start healing until that we can't get to the post-traumatic stage, because we're still in the trauma. And like we say that between the river and the sea, we all have PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the trauma that we talked about, the children with the sirens, I think Palestinian children, they grow up with different levels of trauma about airplanes and helicopters and drones and shootings, and seeing an Israeli flag, seeing a soldier, like the triggers that are imprinted on us living here as Israelis and Palestinians is something that is I will say, a shared experience, but a very, very different one.
Yeah, there's it's really interesting that the word resilience comes up for both Palestinians and Israelis.
Yeah.
In different ways, yet very similar. But
Like صمود?
also
Yeah.
like even in صمود صمود في الأرض, like resilience in your homeland, but also on the day-to-day thing. Even even from supporters of Palestinians and the Palestinian cause and activists, it's seen as like you said, something to be celebrated. Like you defined it, like you could have been Muhammad and Mahmoud, and it would have been the same, and replace Israeli with Palestinian. Before actually, let's move to the second word that you used, which is juggler.
It was the third. The second was activist, but that's for the...
Yes,
Yeah.
you're paying. That was a test. The third word that we're going to talk about now, juggler. Why did you use that word?
Because I find it that when I'm involved in many, many things, in many initiatives and projects. In the first season, you talked about one of the weak points of this ecosystem of civil society and people-to-people work, which is like double deeping. Like you have not the same people, but you have a lot of familiar faces of people who can speak English, who can, like Israelis and Palestinians, who find themselves in the same programs, flying around the world, in the same dialogue, in the same opportunities. And it's a limited, like it's a small pond. And I think that in the last 5 years, it has expanded since October 7th. It really expanded, maybe not expanded, but replaced a lot of people after October 7th. They retracted back to their own communities. I think that there was a lot of hurt and a lot of trauma, even inside the peace-building space. A lot of Israelis who looked at their Palestinian counterparts saying, I thought we were friends, like we spent summers together and we did dialogue sessions together, but I didn't saw you on Instagram condemn Hamas or come out in support of, like, check up on me. And a couple of weeks later, when Israel started, the same day they started bombing, but when the ground invasion started and we started seeing the death toll in Gaza and the pictures and what happening in the West Bank since October 7th, and a lot of Palestinians said, where are you? Like, I thought we were fighting together, but I see your social media all like, I was called up for reserve, let's go, let's march into Gaza. And I think that there was a lot of very uncomfortable conversation. A lot of people said I lost faith in the other side and they stepped back. And for me, got to do a lot with my experiences on October 7th, but I leaned into that space. And I have a lot of colleagues and partners that saw that this is the most important space to hold, a space where Israelis and Palestinians can continue to communicate. But I'm one of the products of this small pond, and I'm a juggler because I'm the CEO of a nonprofit working in Israel, mostly in Hebrew. I'm part of different initiatives and programs. I'm a medic and an ambulance driver. I'm a dog trainer. So I try to juggle a lot of things. Not all of them are political, but a lot of the things that I do that excite me got to do with peace and reconciliation, with co-resistance in Israelis and Palestinians. And I think that as time goes by, I need to narrow my proficiency. I need to start saying no to things, but it seems like I'm juggling 10 balls and now I'm juggling 7 balls, and I need to find my balance. But the fact that I can enter a room or be present on a panel and think about what hat I'm wearing, I think that it's a good thing. I enjoy it. So I enjoy the juggling part of it.
No, of course. It is a good thing. Do you want to add anything about the juggler part, or?
No, I think that's perfect, and it's a perfect segue to talk about, mentioning Mehazkim and mentioning, you're a CEO of a nonprofit. I think it's the best way to, unless you have another thing you wanted to add.
I'd like the transition is for you, before we talk about your activism, we both know the story, but our listeners might not. Can you tell us how you became an activist? Because I know that's also a story. You can describe it.
Sure. So this part is only for a Patreon. So I was born and raised in Israel, and growing up in Israel, especially during the time that I grew up in. So when I was 10, the Second Intifada broke out. So it was a very violent time. And looking back, I feel like I had a normal childhood. I went to school, I played football, I went to the Scouts, I was part of a youth movement, parties and doing what a normal child that I hope that a lot of kids around the world experience growing up. A very supportive and loving families and celebrating birthdays and holidays and so forth. But also you have this daily reminder that you live in a conflict zone. So my parents not allowing me to board public buses. Like I remember vividly being like a 12-year-old having an argument with my parents because I have friends and their parents are allowing them to go and watch a movie at the cinema, the movies. But just 2 weeks ago, there was a suicide bomber in the mall and they said, no way. And I'm having an argument like it's a sign of bad parenting that you're saying like, stay in the house. So in Israel, you have mandatory military service. For me, it was obvious that I'm going to go and serve in the army. My dad, when he came to Israel from Iran, because he was fluent in Farsi and Arabic and French and English and Hebrew, he was an intelligence officer. So I grew up with a father who's an officer in the Israeli army. I am the youngest of 3 brothers, so we're 3 boys, and we're 3 years apart. When I was younger, mandatory military service was 3 years long. On the week that my oldest brother finished his military service, my second brother was drafted. On the week that he was released from his army service, I was drafted. I served as a combat soldier in the special forces, and I actually served for 4 years. And I became an activist because of the experiences that I had during my military service. I didn't enter the army an activist, and I'm not sure that I left the army an activist. I think that it was only when I took off my uniforms and got a chance to process my trauma and the experiences that I had in Gaza, in the West Bank, that I understood what happened to me. and what I did and what I saw. And I started connecting the dots because when I was younger, I saw my brothers go into war. I saw my brothers go to funerals. When I was in the army, I went to funerals of people younger than I that lost their lives because of this conflict. And I think that my generational lens, my generational identity is very much connected to my activist, because I found myself filled with anger, and the anger was directed to my parents' generation, that they didn't do enough to make sure that I'm not going to go on the same course. I had a lot of empathy to my parents because I saw them being parents of 3 soldiers having a decade of sleepless nights. I saw what it does not just to my generation, my friends, but also what it does to my society. And so I have very good friends that I grew up with that they weren't combat soldiers, and they're not as political or as political as I am. And I think that there is a very extreme experience that changes who you are. I have people who served in the army with me that are more right-wing and vengeful and angry and traumatized, and they took it to, I will say, a less constructive or a road with less empathy. But I found myself with the unique experiences that I had that were unique for me, but I know that are not unique at all. But I'm decided that I was pushed into taking a more active role in ending the occupation and bringing a reality of peace. And not just peace, not just an end of violence, not just a reality where there aren't no sirens or attacks or violence or occupation or violation of human rights, but the end of conflict, which is not peace, it's reconciliation. And reconciliation cannot happen without justice. So my activism is not just fighting against policies, but the intrinsic inequality and injustice that we have right now in Israel-Palestine, and we had in the last century or so.
Was there something specific that happened that was the light bulb moment or the aha moment? I know it's I'm asked that question a lot. There is not one moment, but something that comes to mind when you're asked that question.
So it's hard to put it down into one moment, but whenever I'm asked that questions, I have 2 memories that comes to mind. Both of them got to do with death, and I think that it's also in the meta of things. The first one is that during my military service, was Remembrance Day. Every year, Israel celebrates its Independence Day. The day before Independence Day is Remembrance Day. Very sad day. Like they say that there's this abnormality in Israeli society that the difference between the saddest day of the year and the happiest day of the year is 60 seconds. And I was a soldier. I was in the army, and they took us on Remembrance Day to the ceremony. They took us to a monument of the paratroopers, and we were standing there, and it was hundreds of soldiers my age, looking like me, wearing uniforms, short hair, red berets, standing in front of this monument with names of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fallen soldiers. With they wore uniforms, they were my age when they were killed. This thing about this meat, metaphor of a meat grinder. We're standing here, and we're in front of this monument commemorating dead kids, like soldiers. And then I remember going back to my base, and I think it was the early days of WhatsApp, and writing in my WhatsApp groups with my childhood friends that they don't care about us, they're just sending us to die. This is such an abnormal, crazy reality that you need to find and try to claw back normalcy. And a lot of Israelis, they either go to South America or India. And I decided I finished my military service. I worked for catering, and I bought a one-way ticket to India, and I traveled in India and Thailand and Laos and Vietnam. This is where I met Shil, who's now my wife. She was also doing her post-army trip. We met in Thailand. And after 5 months of traveling and processing my trauma and meeting people from all over the world and understanding that, okay, I'm not in the army anymore, I can start to like plan forward and think about what I want to do. I was homesick. I had a niece that was born, my first niece, and I decided that I want to go back home. So I bought a one-way ticket from Hong Kong to Israel. And being a dramatic character that I am, I bought the plane ticket for the night before my birthday, and I didn't tell anyone that I'm coming back. I just told my brothers, but I wanted to surprise my parents after 5 months of not seeing them. And I take the 15-hour flight from Hong Kong to Tel Aviv, and when the plane lands, I take my phone out of my backpack and I turn it on, and I'm bombarded with hundreds of text messages from people I went to the army with asking me if I heard what happened. And I'm going into the news apps and the news sites, and I see that there was an incident in the Israeli-Lebanese border and that there are casualties, so soldiers that were killed. And I know one of the soldiers that were killed, an officer. He's the oldest brother of my best friend from my military service, someone that I'm very, very much close to. We went through our military service together. I know his family, he knows my family, and his older brother was in a car doing like a patrol, and Hezbollah militants fired a rocket, and he was killed. And it was a slap in the face and a punch to the stomach. So I thought I left all the trauma and all the bad things there, and I'm coming back home like after months of traveling, and you get hit in the face of welcome home, this is the reality. My brother picks me up from the airport with my niece, and I go and I surprise my parents, and I go to sleep, and I wake up in the morning of my birthday, and I go to the funeral in Mount Herzl in the military cemetery. And standing there in his funeral, seeing his pregnant widow and his parents and his brothers, one of them is a very, very close friend to me, and seeing this, like, you try to run away, you try to say, I'm gonna live a normal life with food and friends and just put the bad things that happened in my past, but you can't run away from the reality. And standing there, I said, this realization that I need to change the reality. So not an aha moment, but a couple of weeks after, I joined a political party, and I started volunteering for Peace Now. And I think that it really changed a little bit of my
adjusted
career.
Your sail a little bit.
And pushed towards your activism.
Yeah, they say the pessimist complains about the wind, and the optimist hope that the wind will change, and the pragmatist adjust the sails. So I think that it was a little bit of sail adjusting.
And it's funny how, whatever we do, so long as the reality doesn't change, whatever you do, you'll always come back and punch you in the stomach. It's a mirror image of my best friend, and I'm sure he's going to be listening to this episode. And he finished, work, and he had a break, and he goes on a trip, leaves everything behind, war, this, that, gets, wants to come back here with fresh new energy, lands here, 2 days later, Iran happens. And everything I built up in my holiday and my break and all the kind of the calmness I gathered to get the energies to start rolling again, boom, disappears. And I'm back to the moment before I flew. And it just, you cannot really escape it.
I had a professor. I did my bachelor degree in political science and philosophy, and I did my master's in emergency and disaster management. And the resilience part is from a course I took on the psychology of disasters. which was fascinating. But in my political science and philosophy degree, I had a professor. His name is Dani Firk. He's one of the founders of Standing Together, Nakefman. And he taught us that in order to become an activist, there are two conditions that need to be fulfilled. The first one is that you will be convinced or you believe that you can change the reality around you. And the second condition is that you understand that the present is not satisfying. Because if you only have one of those, you can say, yeah, of course I can change reality, but everything is perfect. Or you can say, yeah, I can see everything is shitty, but I can't do anything about it. You won't go through this transformation. And I think that we have experiences in our lives that empowers us to understand that we have the ability to create change, but also that our eyes are open to the things need changing.
We'd like to take a moment to thank our Patreon community. Without you, UTTN wouldn't be where we are today, and we wouldn't be able to shed light on the important activism and co-resistance happening on the ground. So if you'd like to be part of the change, go to patreon.com/thirdnarrative, where you'll get exclusive content from Ibrahim and I and monthly Zoom sessions.
In our second segment, we ask each of our guests to tell them, now that we know who you are, and even more so, how you got to the world of activism. Now the question is, what do you do with all the multi-layered hats that you mentioned, all the things that you're juggling? What do you do, Eran?
So
what are you juggling?
So first of all, I'm a peace activist. A lot of the work that I do got to do with changing the reality of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to the better. I'm the CEO of a nonprofit in Israel called Mehazkim. Mehazkim in Hebrew means to strengthen or to empower. And we're a left-wing digital movement. So we're left-wing. We're not just about the occupation and the conflict. We deal with women's and LGBTQ rights and climate justice and social justice and democracy. So across the spectrum of what can be described as the progressive agenda or the left of center. So any cause or protest or issue that has something to do with democracy, peace, justice, or equality. So this is the left-wing part. The second part is digital. Our expertise, our comparative advantage in the field is social media. So we curate, we produce, and we disseminate political content online. We run the biggest social media, I will say, political content manufacturing mechanism. So we produce around 200 pieces of political content every week, and we reach around 1.5 million Israelis every month. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Telegram, WhatsApp, X or Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, and 65% of the content is not our content, it's other people. So Mehazkim is a platform, it's like a megaphone, and we empower other people. So Ibrahim writes a very nice post or films a really nice video, and instead of it reaching 10,000 people, we will take his words, we will credit him, we'll put a flattering photo of him, and we will show it to 70 or 80 or 200,000 people. And especially what we do very, very well is what we call cross-platform. So Ibrahim has a very good, effective presence on Instagram, not so much on Twitter. So we'll take his words and put it on Twitter. We'll take a Facebook post and we'll put it on TikTok. We'll take something from Instagram and put it in WhatsApp. So this... to create, I will say, a noise machine or an ecosystem. So we said left wing, we said digital, we're a movement. Mehazkim is not just an organization. This is not just about raising awareness. This is about a movement. A movement means that you try to build political power, to invite people in, to be part of a movement that is built out of people. But we're a movement. There's a direction. We're going somewhere. We're trying to create movement, and we have a very, very clear destination that we want to be. We want to live in.
What's the destination?
We want to live and build an Israel that is fairer, that is safer, that it is more equal, that it's actually a safe place that you can be proud of. And this is not the reality right now. And in order to get there, there's a lot of things that need to change, but there is this decade-long delegitimization of the term left-wing, and especially the kind of work that we do. There's a decades plural long delegitimization of Jewish-Arab political partnership and building alliances that are across Palestinian citizens of Israel and Israeli Jews. We're trying to reshape the conversation to create what we call bigger we. There's a new we, or an us that is bigger than what is usually referred to when we say us. So this is Mehazkim. But I'm also part of something called the Phoenix Framework, that after October 7th, we came a group of young Israelis and Palestinians that were more on the political advocacy part of things, originated from an organization called New Story Leadership that every summer brings young Israelis and Palestinians to intern in Congress in Washington, D.C. I had this transformational experience in 2019 to intern in Congress. And we came together in Geneva with the help also of Beit of Hope. And we wrote our peace plan, our post-war comprehensive peace plan, because we understood that the last war in Gaza ended in a ceasefire. And the one before that ended in a ceasefire. And the one before that ended in a ceasefire. And that for the last 30 years, people are talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with the same empty terminology, with the same, I will say, superficial list of core issues. If our listeners are well versed in Israel and Palestine, everybody knows that in order to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you need to solve Jerusalem, refugees, borders, and security, and that's it. And that list was written by Israelis and Palestinians in 1993. They said, if we can solve these, we can solve the conflict. They didn't know what social media is. They didn't know what climate change was, or climate crisis. They didn't know. It was before there was peace between Israel and Jordan. Mm-hmm. You cannot have a conversation about Israel-Palestine in 2025 without referencing the regional framework. The core issue list of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is outdated. And what the Phoenix Framework comes to do is to update that list, to talk about mental health and post-trauma and how we address that, how we can harness social media in order to prepare our public for peace, what and how we see the reconstruction of Gaza and Israel's role in the reconstruction of Gaza. So we have 6 areas of opportunities in the Phoenix Framework, and I call upon all of our listeners to look up, to follow us on Instagram, on TikTok, to go to our website and read the Phoenix Framework, because we have an 80 pages plan about how we can update not just the conversation, but how can we address the reality in order to bring peace and justice and reconciliation.
I want to go back to the first. So we talked about, at this point, 2 main projects that you're part of. One where you're the CEO in Mehazkim, and then New Story Leadership and the Phoenix Framework. Let's start with Mehazkim really quick. So first question is, you're trying to create a better Israel and a society that it's just, democratic, and equal, and supporting other voices on the ground, as well as bringing your own and elevating. The question is, how does it connect to we mentioned pragmatism, pragmatically, as our cousins say, tachlis. Mm-hmm. What's the political change that you aspire for? Because we can speak all day long. If there's no change in the political structure or the faces that exist, we'll still be in the same thing. Question is, how do you see your role? Obviously, it's not your role to change everything, but what's your role specifically in changing that? And looking at the Israeli society today, do you see a role for Mehazkim in specifically how to connect Palestinian citizens and Jewish citizens, especially with the Israeli center left or even center. The Israeli left in other places is barely a center. When it doesn't see Palestine, doesn't recognize our idea, it doesn't see us as equal partners. It see us as somebody who just to be under their wing. How do you work to change that?
Good question.
Is the Israeli center even a partner?
Yeah.
Because it
So-
doesn't seem that way at the moment.
So, to answer that questions, I think the best way to think about it is to look at the theory of change that we use in Mehazkim. There, in politics and in this kind of campaigning and community organizing, there are different theory of change. And our theory of change is energize your base to persuade the middle to isolate the opposition. There are people and organizations and initiatives and projects and politicians and political parties that see their role as penetrating the echo chamber, or expanding into new audiences, or reaching across the divide. That's their role. They can do that. What we see is, in order to bring the change that we want to see, we need to make sure that the base, like the choir, is singing in unison. We want to make sure that people who believe in justice wake up in the morning and they feel empowered. They feel that they can hold their head high. They can have the sense of accomplishment, the sense of strength, the sense of community to go out into the world and empower others and inspire others. And the content that Mehazkim empowers and disseminate is for the base. And when they share it, it creates a norm. And when we talk about Jewish-Arab partnership and especially political partnership between Israeli Jews and Palestinian citizens of Israel, there is a rigged game, because this country and the political conversation is racist. Jewish supremacy is normalized, and there are not enough guardrails against racism, violence, discrimination. There's something baked into the system that this country was built upon that allows discrimination, not just on a systemic level of the institutions, but it trickles down that to everyday racism, discrimination, and I will say trying to erase an identity. In order to push against that, my role, I see Mehazkim's role, is not working with the Palestinian citizens of Israel, but working with the base. It's about not just educating, but normalizing. It's about walking the talk. It's about creating the this is the right way. It's about calling out racism wherever it appears, in the left wing, in the center. And it's about saying, again, if I'm going back, it's about redrawing the us, the we. That when we say we don't just mean Jews. Like when we talk about the future that we deserve in this country, so we talk about a we that is a center-left Jewish Arab political camp. And right now, the political center is confused. The political center prefers to go and look for partners with Jewish supremacists and racists. We need, as civil society, to signal to our politicians, to the people who claim that they represent us, what we expect of them. And in the coming year, there should be elections, and Mehazkim's role is to influence the discourse, to make sure that when we talk about the next government, when we talk about policies, when we talk about how we get up out of this disaster and rebuild, so we have a country and a government that works for all of the citizens, no exceptions. Because right now there are multiple exceptions.
My question would be, like you said, like the entire parameter of what is right and what is center and what is left, and what is left of the left, has changed after October 2023. And even for me, like a lot of things that I would have seen as acceptable and partners to work with, even if they're still the same, I think it's a problem that they're still the same. And I would think 1,000 times before like working with them, at least publicly. Giving my feedback for sure, but working with them publicly is seen to many people as a statement. So my question to many Israeli activists and many peace activists and initiatives is, what changed? What did, because Mehazkim is way before, right?
Mm-hmm.
What changed? Something that's well, you choose if obvious or not obvious, but what has changed, not just in the discourse or the rhetoric, but strategy?
So when you say that potential partners, like the definition of right and center and left changed for you, you mean that?
I think for everybody it changed, not just for me. Like because when a catastrophe widens and opinions widen themselves and different solutions appear, and like different with the definition of what is right and center, like whoever, like people sometimes that are advocating, Israelis that are advocating for the hostages, are seen as left, or and not, like the entire definition, it's mush.
But you said that to say that, like, a lot of people that you thought about potential partners because of the war or after the war started exposed themselves as being racist or like genocidal, or like when you said like the demarcations of center and left and the definitions change for you, you feel like you have less people to work with or more people to work with?
I think it depends on who's defining those, like who's making those definitions. But I'll give you like a very stark example. Previously, like before October 7th, I would be okay having more conversations and even working with somebody who's in reserves, for example, somebody who's from a settlement or something like that. Now I think there's more hard lines. There's more hard lines because there's something that's like, unfortunately, the occupation was normalized and people were like, there's nothing we can do about it. Like, we believed it. We believed that there was nothing we can do about it. But now that there's like continuation, like the same way for Israelis that there's a hope of bringing them back home, there's a hope of saving even like that, the children in Gaza, the people of Gaza, rebuilding Gaza. Even like the concept of peace and coexistence and living each other and co-living with each other and collective liberation, like that, because it's still ongoing, it's still there. I feel like before it was like, this is what we've got, we're going to work with it. Now there's more red lines, and that's why I asked the question, what changed?
I think that you asked the question, you put it on October, and I think that we should try and look at the wider context, because 2023, the year before October 7th, we saw the biggest protest in Israel's history. And the beginning of the redrawing of political camps didn't start on October 7th, it started during the protest. The emergence of something that wasn't existing before, something called the Democratic Liberal Camp. And week after week after week, hundreds of thousands of Israeli Jews were coming together to protest against the power grab and the judicial overhaul. The representation of Palestinian citizens of Israel was not representative of the part of the population, but still, unfortunately, for strategic reasons, we fought in Mehazkim to be the left leg of the protest, to connect the new emerging activists to issues. There's a whole rant about how a lot of the main dominant voice of the protest was "Save Israel," and their chant was "Demokratia," like democracy, and their symbols was the Israeli flag and the Israeli Declaration of Independence. But there was a smaller voice that was still in the protest, not just in Tel Aviv, throughout the country, that was not chanting "Save Israel," it was chanting "Fix Israel. And the chant was not democracy, but equality. And the issues or the villains, even the villains, if the villains of the Save Israel camp was like Yariv Levin and Netanyahu, the villains of the Fix Israel camp was Smotrich and Ben Gvir, because they knew that the problem, like the judicial overhaul, is just a symptom, and the problem is Jewish supremacy, is the occupation, that people moved. Like at the first couple of weeks of the protest, the beginning of 2023, I had this image of there's the mainstream only Jews marching in the streets, speaking in English and in Hebrew, but no Arabic. And then you had the anti-occupation bloc, you had the veteran civil society, and I thought that these are fixed positions. Like you can either be in the Fix Israel camp or the Save Israel camp. But in week 12 and 13 and 16, I saw people move across. People who went to the first protest with an Israeli flag saying we need to stop the judicial overhaul to we need a constitution. Or like there was a specific point where there was this horrible settler violence attack in Hawara.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next Wednesday, there was a protest in Tel Aviv, and it was police brutality, like the police throwing stun grenades and using like horses, and there were tens of thousands of people chanting to the police, "Where were you in Hawara? Like, why are you here, like using violence against us when you need to go and chase and bring the violent settlers to justice?" And I think that people started throughout 2023 connect the dots. So, in one way, yeah, October 7th and the war polarized and galvanized the Israeli society, that it's an us against them. It's a clear us and it's a clear them. The masks are off. The rhetoric and policies and statements and ideology and values of both sides are very, very, very clear. And I think that this is a positive development, that it's a good thing. Because for the last decade, I've been watching the political center working in order to blur the lines. I saw Netanyahu working in order to blur the lines. I saw the left trying to appease the right, trying to make sure, no, we are all the same. Like, let's reconcile, like this appeasement. And I was working against that trend, saying there's a good thing that there is a right wing in Israel. There's a good thing that there's a left wing in Israel. There's a good thing that there's disagreement between the political sides. Like, we need competing visions for Israel, and not just distinct visions. We need contradicting visions. We need to make the choice very, very clear. That I can say now what I said, like even before you asked what changed. I think that 2023 is the year that things changed. That we said everything that they are, we are not, and everything that we are, they are not. We have a government that is united around the value of Jewish supremacy, that is monolithic and homogeneous in their hate to Palestinian, hate to women, hate to LGBTQ, hate to poor people, hate to Jewish-Arab partnership. This is they're united in that. We need to be the alternative, not just the opposition. And in order to be an effective alternative, we need to celebrate our diversity, to look at our diversity as a feature and not a bug. People say, no, there are too many protest groups. Like you have Standing Together and you have Brothers in Arms, which is like a very militaristic anti-government group. They can live together. They can protest together. They can agree that even if they can't agree this is where we're going to, they can say this is not the way. Like Ben Gvir is not the way.
Which is, we talk about it. We talked about it on the ride here, how sometimes mechanisms within the right unite despite differences, and within the left, it doesn't.
But it does.
Oh.
You saw it. You saw it in the protest. You would walk into the protest and you have
like
40 different T-shirts and groups and corners. And this is more radical and this is less radical, but they come together and they identify each other as part of a bigger we. I think that the fact that we have more red lines is a good thing, because the fact that someone like Ben Gvir and Smotrich got to where they got on the votes and on the support and on the no, it's not as bad as you say it is. I think that people understand, not just when we have the wrong people in power, but when we have the people with the wrong values in power. And we need people with better values, with a clear vision that believe in social justice and welfare and equality and dignity and peace and democracy. And I'm really looking forward to the next elections, because I think that there are a lot of people who woke up, not just during the protest weeks, but especially after October.
And I also will say, like, now that you're speaking, it's like, it brings me back to 2023 and the first weeks of the protests and how they were conducted, and how a few weeks after that I got an opportunity to speak with Shir, who's a mutual friend, and we had that conversation. And
Shir Mehazkim from Have You Seen the Horizon Lately?
Yes. Shout out to Shir. She got me the first stage to speak to the Israeli public, and in the protests in Tel Aviv. And I was very, insistent. Like, I'm gonna say what I define myself, and obviously, like, it was yes, please do. And I was also surprised that vast majority of the audience cheered when I said, I'm an Arab, I'm an Israeli citizen, and I'm a Palestinian. I'm all of the above and not either or. And I expected that moment to be a moment of silence or some boos or something, but it was actually a moment of cheer. So maybe that process of changing within the Israeli society started, but I'm wondering whether or not it stopped on the 7th, and whether or not there's a now resurgence of that waking up again. Because without the partnership, with the alienation of different groups, there won't be political change. We talk about Arab-Jewish partnership. The center and the left in Israel is smaller than the right in the numbers and in votes. It's really contested, and there is a 30% block of Arab voters who don't vote, who could. They're not people who don't vote ideologically. They don't have anywhere to vote to. That's where I see a role of left parties in Israel reaching out to that public, because that can change elections. We talk about 7 seats.
Yeah, but
I want somebody who's going to wake up in the morning and realize just 3 things.
Before you continue, I want to push back on the concept of even before October 7th, the judicial overhaul, there was no unity and things being like even the so-called Israeli left. Like I saw, like in Tel Aviv, I was there breaking like the fights between people. Like you're there fighting for the quote unquote Israeli democracy, and you're refusing that another person is waving a Palestinian flag for 5 seconds. I find it to be extremely, like, not what you're saying, but what I saw, and how, like, whether it's fixing Israel or saving Israel, or fixing democracy or saving democracy, I don't see it as more like right now, especially with the far right rising everywhere, not just here, but everywhere. I do not think like the red lines need to be bolder and bolder. It's like there's one of the episodes I think we talked about compassion. You can't be half compassionate. You can't fix compassion. You're either compassionate for everybody and you can hold space. It's either a trait that you have or a trait that you don't have. And I'm not talking about one day I'm pissed off and I don't have compassion for X, Y, and Z, and I don't have tolerance. I'm talking about if you have selective compassion. If selective compassion is not compassion, selective democracy is also not democracy.
You're right.
And the same thing for Israel. As long as there's an occupation, Israel is not democratic. I don't care whatever happens on the beaches of Tel Aviv, whatever happens in the protests. Just that the mere fact that it took so long. When was it? Was it like 75 years? and people in Tel Aviv, that's supposed to be the bubble of like coexistence and peaceniks and whatever, don't like connect the dots that where you're living is what you're doing, your day-to-day life is connected and supporting what is going on in the West Bank. The fact that settlements and settler violence is built into the system, and it's not just encouraged or giving a blind eye. It is the system. It is part of it, and that's why I say like the definitions changed and like what is left and what is center. I think like it's either like what we're fighting for is way clearer now. So that's the pushback that I want. Like in Tel Aviv, even though you were praised or however the reaction was, I don't think it was like representative or a reoccurring thing. I saw physical fights, not
Over
even
flags,
over flags, over the kufiya, over and even just anti-occupation stuff.
Yeah.
I
I think that tension is positive. I think that I'm not searching for unity. I'm not searching for everyone being the same. I think, first of all, about what you said, I totally agree with everything that you said. We cannot call ourselves democracy when we're occupying millions of people and violating human rights and international law as a policy.
And this is pre-October 7th.
Yeah. And I think that our problem is not with settler violence. The problem is violent settlers. I think that we should try and focus our grievances to villains, to people, and not phenomenons. Like, not racists. Like, there are people waking up every morning deciding, I'm going to continue oppressing. I'm going to go to the next village and terrorize a family. Like, this is not something that exists in like a conversation. These are people that are deciding, people that we can arrest, that we can outlaw, that we can vote out of office. Like the biggest problems of our lives and our realities are created by people that wake up every morning and make a conscious decision to continue or worsen our reality.
Can I tell you what I'm hearing while you're talking, and you tell me if because like we're different people and we see things differently, but what you're saying, what it translates to me is as if we're talking about the climate crisis, and you're saying it's not about the climate crisis as a phenomenon, it's about people that don't recycle.
No,
and
it's about politicians who are not passing legislation. It's about factory owners that are keep polluting. These about like climate crisis can be solved and tackled if we have better leaders. Like, this is not something that is happening to us. This is something that we are doing. We can, if tomorrow we decide that we're going to take on climate crisis and we're going to pass legislation and regulations, that we're going to fine factories that pollute our oceans and air, that we are going to make a collective effort as humanity to make sure that this planet is habitable and that we leave a better planet for our children, we can make it work. This is not about the people who are recycling. I'm talking about villains. About not the person that is an individual that is deciding to do something, but the person or the people, a small group of people, usually very powerful and very wealthy, that are taking advantage of the reality and making our life worse.
What I'm saying is that it's not just individuals. It's the entire system.
Yes.
Like Israel functions simultaneously with what's happening in the West Bank. It is not two separate things. Simultaneously, it's not a group of violent settlers. It is settlements and establishing settlements. It's it's the difference between when somebody is under military law and somebody else is under civilian law, and that's not just the settlers. But if we're looking at a concept of coexistence or actual liberation for everybody on the land, nobody should be under military law. And right now, they're just to like explain it more deeply, I see it as the entire thing together. I don't see a two states, two like I see it as it is right now. Like all the governments can recognize Palestine, but the occupation still stands, and that means it's a recognized occupied state. That's what it is right now.
And it's a difference, because there's going to be a negotiations between, right now people are talking about we need peace between Israel and the Palestinians. No, it's Israel and Palestine now. Like, symbolism matters, and I agree with you that it's systemic. I'm holding that the fact that sometimes we need to point the finger not to a phenomenon or a system, but to villains, to people, and to understand that we can replace those people. With that being said, I think that we should be kind to people and ruthless to institutions and systems. And we need to dismantle systems of oppression. And the occupation is baked into the Israeli institutions, not just towards Palestinians who live in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza, but also Palestinian citizens of Israel. This is a fact. This is something that we need to fix. And I think that when we talk about radical, like the term radical comes from Latin. Radic means root. A radical person is not an extreme person. A radical person is a person who pursues a radical change, meaning changing things from the root. When we have a better government, and we can go back to talk about the elections, but or turnout in Arab society, I think it's not the most important thing, but we need radical changes. And I think that throughout 2023, from that tension that you saw in the protest of, don't wave the Palestinian flag and we shouldn't talk about the occupation, and why are you're mixing things up, or you're antagonizing potential partners who are right-wingers who are not going to come to a protest if it's anti-occupation. From that tension and argument, there was a message. There was this kind of articulation of what are we doing here? Are you fighting just to stop a bad thing from happening, or are you fighting for a radical change? And I think that I'm sure of it, that more people came from the let's stop from bad things from happening to we need a constitution that will guarantee our civil liberties no matter where we come from, or where do we live, or what language do we speak, than people that started from we need to end the occupation into, I'm not sure it's the smarter thing to talk about settler violence in Tel Aviv on a stage right now. So I think that the Israeli public was radicalized in a good way, in a constructive way, to understand that we need to put the system on trial. That October 7th happened not to a fighting democracy, but to a flawed democracy, an illiberal democracy, that for too long discriminated against and undermined not just international law, we see it right now, but also marked citizens as the enemy. Not just Jewish or Arab citizens, but there was a government that declared war against the people that it needs to serve and work for. And I think that this is part of the conversation that is building. And to pivot back to the conversation about elections, to put it on like it's the Arab society's role to save Israel, I don't think that it's the way to go about it. I don't think that it's if someone has a right to vote, they have a right to vote. If they stay home on election day, it's not their fault.
No, I'm saying it's the party's fault for not being able. If you are a party and you want to win and you want to change, here are the people. You know they exist. They're not coming. If you give them something to come, they will.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get more votes. It's a very simple math.
We say that if you want people to come to your party, you need to throw a better party. And right now, the parties are not that exciting.
That's also...
And I think, again, it's the generational thing. When we look at the people who wants us to elect them, either if it's in the Arab parties running in the Israeli parliament or the center-left, there's a deficit in people our age.
But to be frank, like also, and also the problem is that the ones who are within our age range are only the ones who enter the system or the ones who are just like the old system.
Mm-hmm.
It's like what you said about the generational gap. the problem of that is that the system only incorporates people from our generation who work in the same way that the older generation does.
Yeah.
Like someone that we've just spoke about recently with corruption and things, Mai Golan in the Israeli politics. Now she's on being investigated for
corruption, misusing,
many things, and budget and issues. She's 39.
Yeah.
She's from our generation.
But she's a Jewish supremacist. Yeah. She's a racist, a proud racist. She said, I'm a proud racist. Yeah. She entered into the Likud party, who's a corrupt party filled with evil people. Not just corrupt people who are looking out to enrich themselves, but people who see their role into dismantling the social solidarity. Unions, the Supreme Court, the media, civil society, that declared war against the basic pillars of this country.
But against that, if you, for instance, want to change the way that the Likud has run this country, I see other Israeli parties that you're not asking to do a dramatic change in the parties that are opposing the Likud. Like what you want for the Arab party is very, honestly, too basic. Like the Arab society here is not asking for much. End the war is something that's already these parties are on the same line of, for the most part. This country, it became super popular to do reforms on everything. We want reform in police because telling us we want to eliminate crime, no one will buy that. Saying the slogan, we're not stupid. Give me a plan. And
people
expansion of towns.
Safety. I think people
expansion of it's simple.
I don't think it's
I don't think it's that simple.
I think it's radical. It's end discrimination. For 75 years, you didn't allow us to build our cities. You didn't when we called when we needed hospitals, when we needed schools, when we needed universities, you weren't there for us. We demand that you treat us as you treat other citizens. This is a radical change and a welcome one.
But it shouldn't be that difficult.
No, it is difficult, of course. But I think that we live in times where we can reimagine the future and we can demand a future that we deserve. I think that the conversations around the next elections are going to be very, very different than the conversations in the previous elections.
And guys, on this note, remember that Iran, in a year from now, we're gonna our listeners, we're gonna have them remember this sentence, and we will see how the next elections will occur and what kind of a language it will happen. But I think before we end the part about what you do, we talked a lot about Mehazkim, about the Israeli political system. We talked about New Story leadership, the Phoenix framework. But I would love to end with because you mentioned in the juggling part, in the first part, you mentioned about that you also work as a paramedic.
Mm-hmm. Not a paramedic, a medic.
And a medic.
Yeah, and an ambulance driver.
And maybe we can end this section to talk about your medic work and maybe the example from Yafa from a year ago, which is why part of the reason why we have these cushions on this couch.
I don't see the connection, but I'm curious.
I do.
Okay.
And if people are only listening and not watching this episode, we have a couple of pillows on the on the couch next to us. One of them with our Khalas shirt, and the other one is with the Fak Ben-Gvir shirt, which Mehazkim created. And I think people around the world have seen this either in a sticker or in a shirt. And there's a connection there to the story, which Eran will talk about. But can you share with us the medic work itself and the example from Yafa?
So when I was a kid, I played GTA on
I
on
did
the
not
computer.
expect this story to start like this.
And the only way that they can let you drive through a red light is if you drive an ambulance or in the wrong side of the street. So about 10 years ago, I got an ambulance driver license and I did a medic course. Again, experiences that I had during my military service, I saw people get hurt, and I said I want to be able to help, to know. And also in circumstances where people lost their composure, I was able to stay like assertive, and I said that this would, like, this skill set can be put to work in emergency medicine. So in the past 10 years, I've been volunteering in Magen David Adom, which is Israel's emergency medicine services. And on October 7th, I was with my wife in southern Israel, and I went to the Soroka hospital to help. And I came to the hospital with the first wave of casualties. And I spent that day there, surrounded by Jewish and Arab doctors treating Jews and Arabs. Like, when I say the us, October 7th happened to us, the us that I'm imagining because I experienced this, it is Jews and Arabs together. Not to mention the fact, like, driving up here, we're in Nazareth now, I passed Iksal. There's Awad Rausha, a paramedic that was killed in the Nova Festival. Like, there is this attempt to tell a story and to cast Palestinians as the villains and Jews as the victims, as mutually exclusive groups, not mentioning the fact that there are Palestinians, citizens of Israel, that were hostages, that were murdered, that were killed, that were wounded, that we in Majd al-Shams and in Tamra, like, the casualties of war, even inside the Israeli society, are not just Jews. And a year ago, on October of 2024, it was the night before Rosh Hashanah. It was another one of the Iranian attacks. There were numerous ones. And I was with Shir in Yafa in a supermarket, and we heard gunfire. And as someone who lives in Jaffa, it's not that uncommon to hear gunshots. The raging gang violence in Arab towns and cities is something that happens. And even before the war, once a week, we hear gunshots. And it came to a point that we don't even call the police anymore. So we're in the supermarket and we hear gunshots, and it's very, very close. And usually in Jaffa, you hear gunshots and then accelerating motorcycle running away. But this time, instead of gunshots, you hear more gunshots and more gunshots. So we take cover and we call the police and we say, there's gunshots, come. And at the first thoughts, it's like, it's another like gang violence or like crime related thing. But we find ourselves in the middle of a shootout. And everywhere I go, I carry gloves with me. Even now, I have in my back pocket, I have gloves because
it's a medic thing.
It's a medic thing. It's not to be prepared. Maybe it's a scout thing. But people have car accidents and sometimes you need. So I start looking for people to treat. And I find a 17-year-old girl who was shot in her arm. And she's wounded pretty badly. Like, I've seen gunshot wounds in my days, but this was complicated. And I leave Shir at the supermarket and I start treating this girl. And suddenly we hear another round of gunshots very, very close. So we drag her to this back room. And she's Arab. The store owner is Arab. We're in the back room and we're taking shelter. She's shot in her arm, and there's a cashier, and she's holding the girl's arm, and she's like helping her, and I'm calling like the MADA, the Magen David Adom, and I'm reporting like we need medics straight away. And she asked her in Arabic, are you Muslim? And she answers, no, I'm Christian. And then I say in Arabic, and I'm Jewish, and we're all here in this room together. And like 15 or 20 minutes go by, and a lot of police flood the scene. And it turns out that there were two men Hamas affiliated that came from Hebron, and they came to the light rail station in Jaffa. They went into a mosque, they prayed, they took out guns, and the people in the mosque right away called the police. And they stepped out of the mosque and started shooting everywhere indiscriminately. And they murdered 7 people, and then they were shot. And it was traumatizing because it's like Jaffa is a very unique place. It's not perfect, it's far from perfect, but it's a place where like we're trying to build a life together. We're trying to demonstrate our not just coexistence, but a shared life can be. Even now during the war, when there are sirens, I live in a building, 7 floors, half Jews, half Arabs. You step out to the stairwell, the kids, the babies that are crying, they cry the same in Arabic and Hebrew when it's the middle of the night and there's a siren. And Shir and I go home, and as we enter our building, there are sirens because missiles from Iran. Like it's everything is combined. Like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Iran, everything. And I'm soaked in blood, not my blood, the blood of Samira, the girl that I treated. And I go into the shower and I step out and I see in the news, I see Ben Gvir standing in the Jerusalem Boulevard, the main boulevard where the shooting happened. And he's pointing at the mosque and he's saying that we need to demolish the mosque because he's connecting the people who live in Jaffa and the people who came from Hebron. Like, and a side note, that as I see it, there were 3 terrorists that day that came from the area of Hebron. 2 of them were Palestinians, 1 of them was Jewish, Itamar Ben-Gvir. They came to Jaffa with the same purpose, to spread violence, to spread hate, to spread fear. And all 3 of them believed in supremacy of some sort, of the use of violence. They don't see innocent people. They don't recognize humanity in one another. And I did what I do. I'm a social media expert. This is what I do. I'm a peace activist. So I go on Twitter and I go on Facebook and I start writing to journalists and I start writing in WhatsApp groups about my experience. And I'm flooded with requests to be interviewed. And I'm doing some radio interviews because it's all very chaotic that day. The Iranian attack with missiles from Iran and the attack in Jaffa, and a very deadly attack in Jaffa, and Ben Gvir and all the people who are trying to exploit it. And I'm getting a request to do an interview on TV. And they don't have a time to send a film crew, so they say we're going to do it on Zoom. So I say, okay, in 2 hours, I'm going to be on national TV talking about, as a bystander, as someone who treated someone who's wounded. I'm not going as the CEO of Mehazkim. I'm not going as a peace activist. I'm going as someone who was inside of this event, very tragic and violent event. And I'm calling my colleagues, and we're thinking, how can we use this opportunity, this media opportunity, to create a counter narrative? Because Itamar Ben-Gvir is on national TV on all the channels doing his thing, telling a story that it's Jews against Arabs. And it's not only Palestinians against Israelis, but this is Jews against, or Muslims against Jews.
Specifically, like targeting the mosque.
Without realizing but not caring that the doctors that work in the Wolfson Hospital, where you have people who were shot, that were evacuated, and there are doctors that live in Jaffa or Hulon, they probably pray in that mosque. The people who were shot in the light rail, the people who are living in Jaffa, they pray in that mosque. That mosque, like Itamar Ben-Gvir is supposed to serve the people of Jaffa, but he came to an area where people were murdered and is doing it to gain political points. And this is the only story that is being told, and we can create a different story. And then in the conversation about, okay, we have an hour and a half until we go on TV, we say, what can we do on Zoom? How can we harness or leverage the fact that we're on Zoom, that you can you do something that is interesting that you can't do if you're sitting in a studio and you can't do if there's a film crew. And one of the things in the conversation is that you can control the angle of the camera. And I said I want to wear a Fuck Ben-Gvir t-shirt. Fuck Ben-Gvir is an icon that we created. It's a symbol that we created to empower people to defy the government, in order to say that when you have a bully in charge of the police, he's in charge of national security. And we created this Fuck Ben-Gvir t-shirt and hats and flags and keychains in order to make people harness their defiant identity. To wear a Fuck Ben-Gvir t-shirt is to go, like, to flip the finger to the bully in charge. And I said I want to go with a Fuck Ben-Gvir t-shirt. And one of my colleagues, she said, if you're going to wear Fuck Ben-Gvir t-shirts, nobody's going to ask you about your experience. You're not going to have an opportunity. You're going to be looked at someone who's trying to exploit this event politically. So I said, okay, I'm going to wear it, but at the beginning, I'm not going to show it. So in their interview, and it's available online, I'm telling the story of what happened. And then we finished the interview and I said, I just have one more thing I want to say. And then I created this monologue from my messaging experience of saying that this struggle is not between Israelis and Palestinians, and it's not between Jews and Muslims. It's about Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Muslims and Christians that believe in dignity and humanity and equality, and Jews and Arabs, Muslims and Christians and Jews that believe in supremacy and violence. And that the people of Jaffa and my colleagues and the bigger ecosystem is on one side, and Itamar Ben-Gvir is on the same side with Hamas, as I see it. And I take the camera away and I'm wearing a Fuck Ben-Gvir t-shirt. And that was like a very, I will say, viral moment, not to make it small, but it's to embody the fact that even inside a very, very traumatic experience, when we experience war, we're not experiencing war just as human beings or civilians, Israelis, Palestinians. Like, in all of our identities, we also experience what's happening as activists. And we see what is happening to us also as activists, as people who are trying to fix injustice, to tackle inequality, to fight for dignity. So this is my story about how Fuck Ben-Gvir. You said this is what happened in Jaffa is why you have cushions on a couch. And I said, that's a very interesting interior design.
and I remember when the video came out, I mean, one thing I'll tell you is that, it looked brilliant. And you can see how the channel was freaking out and they wanted to cut the shot with it on and the Fuck Ben-Gvir shirt. But also, I'll tell you on a personal note that I showed this video to friends. And I can tell you from my community of Palestinian citizens of Israel, when we talk about partnerships, when we talk about allyships, when we talk about people speaking up, it's this, both our people say the same thing. I don't hear enough from the other side. When they heard you, they said, you really know this guy? That's amazing. Ooh, like, how do you know him? Like, they saw it as a big deal. That here you are on national television, treating wounded, and then you're acting and speaking up. For them, it was like somebody speaking the way we want it from, quote unquote, the others. And that feels how much this is missing. That people, like, as Amira said at the beginning in the introduction of the episode, about not being silent, about speaking against, and it resonates with people. And that action resonated. My friends were not just touched, they were looking, how can I also do something to help like this guy did? Like, it motivates. It was really powerful. I think more than you know.
Thank you.
I'm gonna close this segment, but I'm going to do that with a final question. And part of my question is I think like listeners can tell from my voice that I'm frustrated by this conversation, and I'll tell you why. It's two main reasons. One is that both of you are friends, or both of you are my friends.
We're all friends here, Amira.
Listen, both of you are, like, I speak next to you every single episode. and like the differences, internal differences within different identities of Palestinians, the frustration translates in a different way.
Yeah,
But
agreed.
when you have a friendship with someone that's supposed to be co-resisting with you, and you hear things that you are like the person that's supposed to be like having my back, you're the person that's supposed to give me hope, and then you say something that I disagree with, or that I don't like, or me personally as Amira, it fuels anger in me. So that's part of the frustration. The second part of the frustration is just the trajectory and of the conversation made me feel as if like we stopped behind camera and we talked about it a little bit, but it made me feel like the 67 borders, or what is Israel, however you want to define it, is like this elevated thing off a map that is separated from Gaza and the West Bank. And I think in my eyes, and honestly in reality, it is not in any way, shape or form, not in regards to taxes, not in regards to policies, not in regards to the government. You cannot separate it at all. As a Palestinian, as a fellow person in the co-resistance camp, I'd like to end this segment by asking you about how does your action, whether within the Phoenix framework and Youth Story Leadership, or in Mehazkim itself that works on the ground with Israeli society, how does it help Palestinians specifically right now in the midst, and you can use the terminology that you want, but in the midst of a genocide, how does it help the people?
I think that, first of all, I definitely relates to when you have someone from not your community that you see as an ally. So sometimes it cuts differently. But I think that within our communities and between the different identities in our co-resistance community, it's a good thing that we disagree. We should open up spaces where we can respectfully disagree. It's really, really important. The work that we do in Mehazkim, the work that I try to do, first of all, is to use the platform that we have to expose Jewish Israelis to the stories that are either hidden from them or that they're trying really hard not to see. First and foremost, what's happening in Gaza, but also what's happening in the West Bank. And when people go on our Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, which is powerful assets, and we built our credibility as being not like cynically patriotic, that we love our country, we believe in our society, we strive to be better. And because we are celebrating the diversity inside of our camp, we can attract audiences that are not like, their Instagram feed is not filled with settler violence and Gazan kids. But to use the platform that we built in Mehazkim in order to talk about famine and to talk about crimes against humanity and to talk about war crimes, and also to talk about those reservists and soldiers who are saying, I'm not going, I had enough. To bring the stories that are very, very taboo about what's happening there. Because journalists are prohibited from going into Gaza. There is massive censorship about what you can say and what you can show. Social media is more democratic in that way. So because of our main audience are Jewish Israelis, this is my target audience about how I'm going to change them. We want to radicalize them in a non-violent way. We want to make sure that we are breaking the barriers of the us and them. And when I say us, it's more than just Jewish Israelis and Palestinian citizens of Israel. What we are trying to do, and this is the work that I do, not just in Mehazkim, but also with New Story Leadership and the Phoenix Framework, is to redefine the us in a cross-border way. And when you're saying this is one system, it takes me into this conversation about solutions. And in the Phoenix Framework, we say we're first step two-staters. We support a two-state solution as a very initial necessary step on the road We can't be satisfied with borders and fences and walls. We need to understand that we all belong here. And people in Jenin care more about Jaffa than they care about Bethlehem, and people in Kfar Saba, some of them, they care about Hebron more than they care about Hadera. Like there's one unit, geographical unit, that we have a deep historical, emotional, psychological relationship with, or connection to. And what we're trying to do to change the reality on the ground is to start by changing the mindset of people, then changing the behavior of people, then hopefully changing the policies that are being enacted, and that is how we change reality. So it's go mindset, behavior, policy, reality.
Moving to our last segment of the day is, what's your needs? What is your needs as Iran? What are your needs as Mehazkim, New Story Leadership, the Phoenix Framework?
As an Israeli peace activist.
As an Israeli peace activist. What do you need from us as partners, as me and Amira, and from our audience that is listening from across the world?
Okay, so I'll start with the audience, and then maybe I'll end with what I need from you. So for the people listening to us or watching us now, I have two things I need. One is a do and one is a don't. Start with the positive. And I'll speak for us, we need people to diversify their feed. We need people to make sure that the accounts that they follow on Instagram and TikTok or on Twitter represent a wider perspective than what that they are shown, or the identity of the community that they belong to. And I want to recommend and ask and implore and urge people to follow. We have Mehazkim on Instagram, Mehazkim. Most of the content is in Hebrew, but we also have Mehazkim in English, so in Instagram. So you can follow us on social media. Also, the Phoenix Framework. Maybe the most exciting thing that I'm part of is the Phoenix Framework. I think that it represents an inspiring and a generational and a disruptive, in a very, very positive way, a process about how we can talk about Israel-Palestine. We talk about our areas of opportunities very, very briefly, the reconstruction of Gaza. How can we approach the reconstruction of Gaza? Responsive governance in Israel and Palestine, accountability and transitional justice, the role of the international community, how we prepare the public for peace, and the issue of mental health and collective trauma. All of these issues, topics, we are telling and talking and writing about what we want to see, and it was written by young Israelis and young Palestinians. And again, follow us on Instagram and TikTok. Help us spread the word. This is a very important do. We are drowned by polarizing, hateful rhetoric that is trying to frame this conflict as a football match between pro-Israelis and pro-Palestinians, and we're trying to break through the noise with our message of a collective liberation and dignity and humanity and mutual acknowledgement and recognition. So this is the do. The don't is very simply, don't talk about us without us. There are too many conversations about Israel and Palestine without young Israelis and young Palestinians present. There's a way to bring Amira and Ibrahim and Eran and our colleagues and our circles into those conversations, into those newsrooms, into those dinner tables, into those campuses. When you have a conversation about Israel and Palestine, and you are entitled to have your opinion, your very strong opinion about what's happening here. But I will advise that to try to talk about us without us does not help us. It helps you. So diversify your feed, and yeah, I realize that I sound like a YouTuber, like and subscribe, but follow us on Instagram and TikTok. That is really, really helpful for you also to diversify your feed, so you can not just spread the word, but also challenge your own misconceptions or your own ideas to make them more clear. And don't talk about us without us. And from you, I want to convey my admiration and appreciation to what you do, and that I know that this is maybe the main project, but you are also jugglers. You are also doing other things, and it's hard to do it, especially when you do it alone. And it's important that even in times where emotion runs high and that the forces outside trying to separate us, that we will lean on each other for support and comfort, and let our curiosity lead us and not our judgment. So I ask you to continue to do what you're doing and not give up.
Wow. Thank you so much. I can say personally, it wasn't the smoothest conversation for me personally, but I really appreciate the time that you took to join this episode, and also the time that you take, just your life in general, because you've devoted your life to towards this. And also thank you for always having a listening ear towards not only praise but also criticism from the counterpart. We will have all of your details from social media to website, English, Hebrew, in addition to the Phoenix Framework social media. We have read one of the drafts of them and also submitted our comments. We know this isn't a solutions episode, but it's an embedded solution from young Palestinians and Israelis. Check it out. Also follow us, UTTN, on all social media platforms, on Instagram, on YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow also our individual platforms, either on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook. And we really hope to see you next time on another episode of UTTN, the podcast.